This is Athletes as Educators with former pro basketball player, championship winning coach, and author Angela R. Lewis. Angie Lewis interviews current and former athletes who are passionate about sharing the lessons they've learned and the experiences that have shaped their lives. A resource for parents, a guide for student athletes, a source for current and former athletes, keys to transition off the court. Welcome to the Athletes as Educators podcast with Angela R. Lewis.
This episode of Athletes as Educators. I'm your host, Angie Lewis. Really excited about our guest today, Claire Zovko. Claire played basketball at Pacific Lutheran University, went to the University of Miami's law school, is a practicing lawyer, a professor at the University of Miami, teaches a course, the Globalization of Sport, and also teaches yoga. Claire, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Will you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you see female athletes face as they go from playing a sport into life?
Sure. What I remember, thinking back at that time is up until that time, everything was always planned out. You knew in high school what you were going to do next. You knew once you went to college, you picked a degree and you were studying that, and you kind of had a path. But I remember when the ball stopped bouncing, per se, and basketball was over, it came into this space where it was what's next. There was this space of unknown. I don't know what I'm going to do because I defined myself as a basketball player for so long. So there was kind of like this uneasiness. But in my case, I always loved school, and I knew I was going to go back to school, and it was just a matter of deciding what. So I was looking at law school and business school. So I kind of had that. But then again, when I ended up choosing law school, when I finished law school, the same thing happened. Like, now that law school's over, what is next? Like, how am I going to use this? And where am I going to go? And just this space of unknown, which can be very scary. So I remember that. And also from working with professional athletes now, some of my clients are recent athletes, WNBA players and whatnot. And they talk about the same thing, that once it's over, the WNBA is over, they're in this space of like, what do I do? What am I even good at? Like, how can I add value to this world and in a professional environment? So I think those are kind of some of those challenges about starting to inquire on how you can serve, and where can you serve in what avenue, and what things come natural to you, and then how can you share them with the world? So those types of things. And from my journey, the way I got clarity was just getting more clear with myself and really listening on, like, what do I truly have a passion about? And I might like many things, but like, what comes easy to me? And like, one thing in my case is I love learning, and I conversely love teaching. So teaching does come naturally to me. And so I looked for opportunities once I was done to teach. And so I got that in the college environment and in the sports business environment. But then also I got that in the yoga environment, because really it's a skill set. So whether I'm teaching college students about the globalization of sport, or I'm teaching the principles of yoga to the community, it's the skill set of teaching that, again, anywhere I go down my life, that teaching skill set can and will apply. So just thinking about those skill sets that you already embody and come natural to you.
How did you realize that teaching was your skill set?
So I didn't at first, probably, but it was from some conversations with people, and then I kind of looked back on my life. Yeah. So my mother is a teacher, and I had this small limited view that when I say teacher, I mean like elementary school teacher. Right. And since she was that, for some reason I had this resistance and said, that's not what I want to be. I don't want to be a teacher because it somehow reminded me of that. And I didn't see myself as an elementary school teacher. But I just had such a limited view, and until like my eyes got open, I didn't realize teaching means millions of things. It's this really broad definition. But my mom pointed out to me, she's like, Claire, look, do you realize that you've been tutoring your friends like your whole life? Like, because, math came easy for me, but not for others. So I love having a problem, and if someone doesn't understand it, I put it on me that it's my lack of communication if I can't explain in a new way to help someone understand something I understand. So, that's the challenge I like. And so that's why I would tutor or support or help my friends, because I wanted to show them that math can be easy, but we just have to communicate it in a way that speaks to that particular student or person. And so my mom like brought that up. She's like, you've basically been teaching people your whole life. And so it kind of hit me. I said, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So not that I was ever in a professor-student environment up until the point I actually was, but I look back on the things I've done, and I've been teaching my whole life.
Claire, you bring up such a good point. Usually we can't even see it, like our gifts and talents, because we're just being who we are naturally, and it takes other people. Mamas are pretty good at this stuff. I think they know us really well, but sometimes it takes us reflecting and thinking about other people who've helped us out. I mean, other people who know us well to show us who we are.
Yeah, agreed.
The reflection process is really important. Tell me also about in undergrad, what did you major in and why?
Sure. So back when I was at Pacific Lutheran, I studied business administration. Okay. And my reason in choosing that was at that time when I was 18 years old, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't know what the future held because my focus was just pretty much on basketball at that point. So what I did was I looked at what degree would give me the most options available, what degree would prepare me the most for life. So since I'm not drawn to a specific path as an 18-year-old when I have to choose, I said, let me pick a path that's just going to open a lot of doors. And that's why I chose business administration, because I realized whether I work for a business or maybe one day have my own business, these are, again, tangible, valuable skills that are going to help me in life no matter what.
I love that you had a thought process with your major.
Yeah,
I know for a fact a lot of student athletes don't. I didn't, right? I took this public speaking class. I liked it. I mean, it makes sense considering I'm here now and we're doing this podcast and speaking and writing. But I think it's important that, they look at their options and really think about what they want to do and how they're going to go about and how they're going to be able to utilize that in the future.
Sure.
And what were some challenges that you faced when you transitioned from college and securing your first job?
So in between undergrad and law school, I took 2 years off. And what I did is I saw that basketball and sports were coming to an end, and I did need to transition into the professional world. I still had this desire to be involved in sport because it did provide this environment that I feel like created and the foundation of who I am today. So I kind of couldn't let it go right away. So what I did, even when I was in school, my last couple of years before it was over, I started volunteering and working with the Seattle Sonics and Seattle Reign at that time. So the NBA teams that were in NBA team and then the ABL team that was in Seattle at that time before the Seattle Storm came. So I just got involved. I just wanted to be there and get involved. And then it kind of progressed. So I started out passing out bobbleheads at the door. I started out doing timeout promotions, just anything to be there. And it continued to grow. I continued to meet people in the organization. So when I finished school, I was able to take a more prominent role with the team and work in guest relations and get in the office a little bit. And then by the time I knew I was going to law school, I had seen the attorney of the team at the games and whatnot, and we definitely knew each other by face, but we never had a full conversation. So I intentionally went out of my way to have a sit down with him and have an informational interview before I left and just plant the seed that, hey, now he knows who I am and I'm going to law school and I'm interested in kind of keeping in contact with you. And, I learned about his daily responsibilities and kind of started to bridge that relationship. And then so when I went to law school, I continued to keep in touch with him, periodically. And fast forward, that ended up being my internship between my second and third year of law school. I started to work for the Seattle Sonics within legal and basketball operations. And when I graduated law school, that ended up being my job. So for me, it was kind of not like an abrupt transition once I finished. I wanted to continue to plant seeds along the way and cultivate them to create the professional opportunity I wanted. And, at that time, it was my dream job. So it wasn't work or it wasn't a stress. It was fun, enlightening. I was learning every single day in the sport I love and the professional side.
I love that you were intentional about the people that you stayed in contact with, intentional about your path, and were really clear about what you were doing and why you were there. Sometimes the transition creates this uncertainty, and athletes are literally floating through, trying to renegotiate their identities and figure out who they are. You mentioned that was my dream job at the time. It's important to note that, because we go through changes. What are you doing? When did you realize that it was time to make another move from Seattle to Miami?
What I realized is, I'd stayed local for undergrad. It wasn't far from where I grew up. So when I had the opportunity to go to law school and transition to another city, I knew it was my chance. I kind of knew, like, here's the reason I can go live in another city. And when it's over, I can always come back home. Like, home doesn't go anywhere. So I knew it was just time. I felt there was more, that by getting out, there was more growth available to me. And that's what I wanted. And so, I looked at law schools in Southern California and South Florida, and I ended up, University of Miami worked out. Everything aligned for that opportunity. And I'd say it's the best decision I ever made, because it broke me out of the box and realized that, again, there's more than what I had in my little box of a world. And I totally believe the reason that I was in Miami at law school is why I got the Sonics job. Because with the Sonics job, he was at the time getting like hundreds of resumes to be a summer intern every year. But I was someone different, because I wasn't at the local law schools, where everyone else that applied was at the 2 local law schools. So kind of all the resumes, there was nothing different about them. But then I was, though, the Seattle girl that went to Miami and had this other experience. So I truly believe that's why I stood out from the pack, and even got selected in that situation. So, and then again, by getting out, it's like my worldview just grew, and Miami's one of the most international cities. I almost feel like I'm in a foreign country down here. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love it here. And that has just continued to make me grow. And it's, it's opportunities where for work, I got to go to Brazil and work with some companies down there related to preparing for the Olympics 5 or 6 years ago. I've had all kinds of different travel opportunities, which again just continue to broaden my worldview. So related to the dream job, that was my dream job at the time, but the reason why it's not is because now I see there's so much more. And I was only thinking domestically. And the U.S. is wonderful, but the U.S. is really small. So on the job front, it's like the whole world is the opportunity and possibility out there. So now I realize that and see that. So I can't even define my dream job anymore, because I realize if I try to define it, I'm limiting myself. So I'm just open, and I know it's out there, but I'm continually asking myself, what value can I provide to who, and where I can be of service with the skills, abilities, talents, passions that I have.
You just dropped so much knowledge, Claire, that I'm trying to like bottle that up. I'm so glad we've recorded this conversation and that we're doing this podcast, because you're right. The world is the option. It's not the state that you're in, the city that you're from, the United States. Like, the whole globe is the opportunity. And sometimes when you're a part of a team or you're from a place, you think that that's who you are, and we start defining ourselves by just the limited ability that we have to understand what's possible. You mentioned that you teach a class on the globalization of sports. Will you talk a little bit about why you're passionate about this subject and how it aligns with who you are?
Sure. I think it circles back to that, from the experiences that have arisen in my life. I have this desire to travel and meet people and learn and grow and see how other systems work. Like, I just love learning, so I guess it all goes back to that love of learning. So I had the opportunity right when I got out of law school to be a teaching assistant for a study abroad program in Florence, Italy for 2 summers. And the course that was being taught was international sports law. So I had 2 summers to be in a foreign country and help teach to law students about international sports law. So that started to turn the wheels for me. I really enjoyed it. And then when I came back to Miami with one of my colleagues, we were able to propose a brand new course at Miami Law called the Olympic Games and the Law. So we created that, taught that, and it went well. And after doing all of those 2 courses for about 6 semesters, I felt ready that I could teach this on my own. But I wanted to adapt it and make it a little different and not so much focused on the law, but just as the global business of sport, which is so encompassing and can cut across degrees. And that doesn't just apply to lawyers, but it applies to many people. So I proposed a new course within the undergrad, within the sports administration program, and they loved it. And the dean over there said that, she had been wanting a class like this forever, but she just didn't have time to create it, or they didn't have the resources for it. So when I showed up, they said, no problem. So this new course that had never been taught there, and they just loved it and have given me the green light for me to roll with it and create it. So, I've taught it 6 or 7 semesters now, and it keeps evolving. The way I taught it in semester 1 is different than how I'm going to teach it this fall. And because global sport keeps evolving, the issues that keep coming up, I can't make them up, but they're so interesting. Like with Rio around the corner and the Zika virus, like that's an interesting issue that's never been talked about before, and the liability related to that. So the beauty with the globalization of sport and with the prevalence of technology is that globalization of sport is huge, but at the same time it's very well connected, because no matter where you are, you can kind of touch it on some level. Yeah. So I think no matter what area of sport or even business you seek to work in, this topic could be relevant. And the students seem to find it quite interesting. So I really enjoy sharing.
That is, and there is no question that you're super passionate about this topic. Like your whole energy just went to another level when you talked about the globalization of sport. There were 2 things that you mentioned that are key to come back to. One, you talked about alignment and how your passion and opportunities begin to align and things open up for you. Sometimes when we're when we're going against the tide, so to speak, and we're not moving in our purpose, things can be really, really hard, and we're uncomfortable because we know it's time for us to move. For the young women who will read this book, will you talk about alignment and how important that is for fulfillment in life?
Yes, I think that's the key. And this one, what I'm about to say might not make sense, or might be against the grain, but here's what has worked for me time and time again, is that I noticed back in the day when I was applying for jobs, I'd see a job posting, and then I would somehow try to convince someone else that I was that person that they wrote on who they were looking for, that perfect candidate. I'd say, yeah, I'm A, B, C, and D. But I realized that was just kind of like some sham. It wasn't true. It wasn't in alignment. So I actually stopped applying to jobs off of postings, because I said, I'm not this magical person that they're saying they're looking for. It's not me. I'm someone else. I'm very unique and have different skills and abilities. So what I started doing is I started thinking about, what am I good at? How can I add value? How can I make someone else's job easier? And once I figured that out and had that clarity, then what I would do is tell them. So how I told you a moment ago, how I had the opportunity to be the teaching assistant in Italy. That wasn't something that was posted. But what I did is when I first heard that opportunity was going to happen, I got an email that said, hey, we're doing a study abroad in Italy. Right away, I knew I needed to be on that trip. That was natural to me. I said, I have to be on this trip. And I'm no longer a student, so I can't be a student, but I want to be involved. I know this is just an amazing thing that can help me evolve and grow and learn. So I wrote an email to the professor, who I did not know at that time, and I said, exactly what I just told you. And then I said, now here's the value I can provide. Here's how I can make your time in Italy easier and make your job easier. And I said, may I be your teaching assistant? And here's what I would do. And he said, wow, that sounds amazing. And it sounds like I just have to show up to class and you do all the work. And I said, yeah, that's basically it. Sounds great. And he goes, great. Well, I want to enjoy Italy. So come on. So, awesome. Yeah, so things like that, that's one example, but that's just what I've noticed, that for me, it's worked out to just truly get in alignment with my skills, abilities, and passions, and then not convince, but persuade someone that that's going to help them sleep at night. That's going to make their job easier, smoother. And, as long as someone has the budget for it, people love that and people want that. But there are times where someone says, I'd love to have you, but I can't pay you, or we can't have someone on staff, and that's a different case. And which has taught me the other lesson that in situations like that, when you do get a no, all that truly means is no, not right now. It doesn't mean no forever. And the same thing with the Sonics opportunity, how I started working with Sonics. When I got in with the lawyer, I applied after the first summer and didn't get the job. But I still felt this in me that I knew I wanted it, and I knew I could add value, and I knew it wasn't the end. So I wanted to keep pursuing it. So I didn't let the no be a closed door. I just said, okay, not right now. Continued to cultivate that relationship, continued to plant seeds. And so when it came around the next year as an opportunity, then it was successful. So with me, I've noticed if I'm in alignment and as clear as I can with myself, what's interested of me, what I'm interested in, my skills, passions, talents, all that, it feels natural. It's not a struggle. It's not forced. I'm not worried. If I don't get it, I'm not worried. Like, I know there's something else for me. But, like, I had an amazing interview with a current dream job about 2 months ago. And I was, if I got it, it would have been amazing. And I didn't get it. But it's okay, because that experience, I learned so much. And for me, it was part of realizing that I was even considered for that position. So I had to have this realization of my value, and that I was downplaying my value. But once they interviewed me as a candidate, I just say, wow, they're even considering me. Like, I need to step into my own greatness, like, now. And so though I didn't get the job, I took away a lot, and I'm more in alignment now with who I am. And I know that if that door opened, there's some other pretty cool doors around the corner, and I'm ready for them, and I'm more in alignment as a whole in what I can offer a large organization at this point.
I love your approach to dealing with no's.
Yeah.
We're conditioned as athletes to that losing is horrible. Like, it's the worst thing that could ever happen in life. I mean, think about how many games we cried after and how frustrated our coaches were when things didn't work out right. And I think we do athletes a disservice when we don't teach that is a part of the process, and that it's important to learn from those experiences. Will you talk a little bit about how you're using what you learned from playing ball over the years in your daily life?
Sure. One of the biggest lessons I had to learn through sport, and in high school and in college, was realizing what was on my shirt, the school, the team, and realizing that I was a part of that. And being a part of that meant not only on the court when things are going well, but it also meant when things weren't going well on the court, and it also meant off the court, when I wasn't even at practice, when I wasn't even at school, when I was making other decisions. They weren't just impacting me. They were impacting something much larger. So it was a lesson I had to kind of learn the hard way in high school and college, of who I'm representing. And that as part of a team, which applies later in life, as part of a team, you're in the work environment, or as part of your company, you're representing something larger. So just having that mindfulness that it's not all about you, or not all about me, or all about, the person, that being aware of who your client is, being aware of who you're working with or working for, and having that broader view that everything you do and say and the actions you take don't just impact you, they're impacting many people. So I use that constantly, and especially if there's a conflict, whether it's within my work or it's with someone outside of the work, I take some time to pause and think about that. Like, who am I representing, and how can I speak in the interest of who I'm representing, not in the interest of Claire, but how can I best represent whoever I'm representing? And as a lawyer, I'm representing people all the time. So it's an important question, and it's something that's important to be very clear on. So that's a huge one for me that I go back to all the time.
Knowing that our words have power, our actions have power, our energy matters, how you handle conflict is important. And a lot of the young women ask about that. How do you deal with a situation at work? And I think you answered it beautifully. In addition, some of them wanted to know, how do professionals de-stress? I know you're avid at yoga, and you just came back from 5 weeks in India. Will you talk a little bit about that experience and why yoga is such a key part of who you are?
Sure. The time in India was quite incredible. I'd say what I've learned through the yoga journey, and the other interesting thing about yoga is I started yoga right after basketball finished. Man, if I would have been doing yoga when I was an athlete, it would have been a whole different ballgame. And I realize now how disconnected I was from the feelings in my body, that I didn't see the connection. And I felt that we were taught through sport to be very strong. Be strong, hit the gym, get stronger, get faster. I felt like there was a gap missing in terms of it's important to get strong, and it's also very important and critical to have the matching flexibility to your strength. Yes. And so, now through yoga, I've learned that, I've felt that, I've experienced that, and now when I just go play around for fun and go play a pickup game, I feel amazing. The way I move on the court feels so fluid, and it's because I've created more of this balance internally within my body through the yoga. So for me, now I've been practicing yoga 12 or 13 years, and the journey keeps going deeper and deeper. And so I'd say where I'm at now is I'm at a place where I use yoga and a daily meditation practice to be preventative in the stress.
So that's good.
So what I do by that is getting in a clear place, getting in a stable place, getting in a grounded place daily, so that when something triggers me or when something starts to cause stress in the body, I can notice that and like watch it and have inquiry on why is this happening? Why is X stressing me out? And once I realize why X, Y, or Z is stressing me out, I go back even deeper. Like, what's that all about? What is that attached to? Where's that coming from? And like the thing is, once you get to the root, you can move through it. You can transcend it. You can get past it. So those same things that triggered me a year ago no longer trigger me. So I'm having less stress in my body now than a year ago because I'm trying to consciously be preventative of having stress in my life. So for me, it's not I work hard and then I de-stress. There's no separateness. So it's showing up from a connected place, realizing when stress is occurring, and deciding to let that be a part of me or not let that be a part of me.
That's so good. No, you're right on point. And everyone that I've talked to, no one has mentioned being preventative with stress. It's like preventative with any other situation. It's how to create the environment that doesn't allow for this to be a part of who I am. And
exactly.
That's extremely important.
And once you get to the root of it, and like you find really like some root of something that's causing you stress, it's really amazing that as you clear that out, like things just open up. Like they truly open up. So yeah, that's where I'm at, that I'm just all about having less stress in my life than needing to de-stress from it later.
That's extremely healthy, right? Because typically what people do to de-stress is take on some unhealthy behaviors, whether it's overeating, undereating, alcohol, drugs. Like there's a whole plethora of things that impact our health that are causes of stress.
Sure.
In addition to being at a centered place and being preventative with stress, what would you say are some key skills to have for young women coming from college into the workforce?
I'd say one of the things that I've learned and had a journey with throughout from basketball until now is communication and realizing the power of my voice when it's clear. Yep. And being confident in that, being confident that as a woman, I do have a voice, I have a valuable opinion, and I can add value. So as like I wish, if I'm talking to my old self, I wish back then I would have been more confident in the things I wanted to say, but also more clear in the things I wanted to say, and not afraid to say something different or not afraid to say something against the grain, and that's what I think is beautiful in our world. And as a woman is that we do look at things differently, maybe from a more motherly, nurturing, loving perspective. And that's what businesses need. That if it's just 10 men in a room and they're making all the decisions, they're only looking at 50% of the picture. So as a woman, we provide this incredible other view that we can share and add value to whatever environment we're in. So I would say the value and ability to communicate powerfully, but yet gracefully and respectfully.
How does someone cultivate that skill? I agree. It is important. Powerful, graceful, and respectful combined.
Yeah,
wow.
I know.
How does that happen?
Like the triple threat.
Right.
So it's a challenge, and I'd say for me, it's a matter of trial and error. But knowing that the loudest voice in the room isn't the most powerful.
Right.
It's people that can whisper and everyone's like totally locked in and focused on them. They have power. So, what I've learned too is that our presence is one of the most strongest things we have. Is that when we walk in a room, we actually don't need to speak, but there's a presence that's either felt when you walk in or not. So how do you cultivate that? From my experience and what has worked for me, and the people that I've been around, is getting in your stillness. Is you have to get still. That if we're always going a million miles an hour, there's no clarity. Think about like a snow globe. If you shake it up, it's all crazy. You can't even see what's inside. There's just stuff going everywhere. Well, that's us when we're going a million miles an hour. But then when you pause, when you let the snow globe be still and you set it on the table, all that stuff goes away, and now you have the Taj Mahal, or you have like whatever's on the inside, and it's completely beautiful. So like that's the same thing with us. We have to stop. We have to pause. We have to breathe. And in that, we start to feel our own presence. When we walk in a room, we have to stop. We have to pause. We have to breathe. So that's what I found. And the more I'm connected to my presence, my being, not my doingness, but my being, who I am, then the communication flows easier. But if I'm trying to think, if I'm all up here and I'm thinking, here's what I got to say, here's how I need to respond, I'm all here. So that's not going to be clear. That's going to be all crazy. But when I can have a connection from the heart to the throat and say, that's going to be clear. And that comes from stilling yourself, calming down, be still.
Stop, pause, and breathe.
Yes.
I love it. We need a t-shirt that says stop, pause, and breathe. That stillness and that clarity is not often talked about. Definitely not in competitive sports. You never stop. You don't sleep. You sleep when you die. Sleep is for suckers. Go hard or go home. Like it's so counter to the discourse that we're exposed to and that we're socialized in, that it takes some serious increased level of consciousness to create a shift, especially among athletes.
Yeah, I agree.
How do we teach young women to do that?
Probably starting with awareness that, just how I talked about when I was playing, no one even told me flexibility was important. And people said, like, you got to be mentally tough, but I'm not sure if I was really taught how to do that. Yeah. So now I think, though, with the prevalence of these different mindfulness techniques, where you are being mindful of your breath, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling, etc., that's helping. So I think just awareness and, education that, hey, this can benefit. And if you look at top athletes of our time, a Michael Jordan, a LeBron James, they get still. They pause. They do yoga. They meditate. And like that's when you have that ability where you can go from being totally intense to needing to pause and just being calm and connected, if that's what calls, that's how you can go back and forth between getting in the zone and whatever else you're doing. You can get into that zone a lot quicker when you have that ability to focus, calm down, pause, stop, breathe. So somehow, if it could be relayed to athletes that this is of benefit, because I think a lot of people, like you're speaking to, alluding to, is, okay, I don't have time to stop. I got too much to do. I got to get in 5,000 shots, and I got to do this, and got to do that. But if, and maybe only experience can show this, but it's like, if you don't have time to pause, you need to pause twice.
Right.
You know, like I think you really need to pause if you don't have time to pause. So, you know, that kind of awareness.
Claire, thank you so much for all of your insight, all of your wisdom, for the reminders to stop, pause, and breathe. I'm really thankful that you had the time to share your experiences, because I know that it's very different than a lot of what young women are going to hear and read about and or exposed to. If people want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you, how can they reach you?
Sure, I'm publicly on Twitter and pretty active on there. So it's just my name, Claire Zovko, is my handle. So you can find me on Twitter. And also I'm available through email. If anyone had any further follow-up questions, feel free to email me. No problem.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Claire. I look forward to working with you in the future.
This is Athletes as Educators.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes as Educators podcast. Connect with me through the Athletes as Educators Facebook page or at Athletes Educate on Instagram. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and go over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star review. For more resources and information about today's podcast, you can check us out at AngelaRLewis.com.